I can't believe they said that. Right, right. Yeah, the name of your name. Yes, I know. I'm gonna put on my little report, put this in here. So, I'm pretty, you know, I mean, and that's what road surgery is. I mean, the technical stuff. And he was so dependable. And Herman is. We're going to go ahead and start the meeting, and I do apologize, but we don't have audio this evening, so we're all going to have to speak up a little bit. I'm calling the meeting to order. Okay. If everyone will please stand for the pledge of allegiance and please stand for a moment of silence. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Alderman Massey,
Here.
Alderman Sage,
Here.
Alderman Longley,
Here.
Alderman Burgess, Alderman Pinter, here, Alderman Schmidt, here, Alderman Black,
Here.
Alderman Holman, here, Alderman Gray, here, Mayor Renner.
Here. Thank you very much. You have four. We move to recognitions and appointments, and we start out Monica Bullington to the Connect Transit Board. Monica, are you here? You're here. And then Cody Hendricks from Japanese Sister City. Cody, would you stand? Thank you for your willingness to serve that. Next we move to public comment, and I'd just like to make it clear also, that if I do for every public comment, that if you want us to respond, or if you want immediate answers, I should say, with the city officials, please come to the mayor's open house. I'll be there, and sometimes an alderman or two come, sometimes Steve Rasmussen, or maybe in the future our new city manager. You can get immediate answers. So we sit around that table, and it doesn't have to be on the agenda, or we can sometimes try to solve problems in real time. But in public comment, it's a one-way, it's not really a conversation. I mean, essentially, it's our policy not to respond. So we have one public comment card today, and that person has up to 3 minutes, and that is Scott Steinle.
Scott Steinle, Ward 5. I've brought a couple pieces of street. I've talked to Jim Karsh about this before, and they've just washed down the street, and Terry knows by his ex living around there, that Fleetwood Drive is a very steep street. It's so bad that the drains that were supposed to be reset years ago still have not been reset. We've got money for everything else, why not for the streets? I tell you, I would be embarrassed if I would be anybody that people would come into Bloomington and say, it should say, welcome to Bloomington, home of the potholes. You know, if you'd have done a little each year and not put it off, you wouldn't be in crisis mode at this time. And I think that's terrible. I would be embarrassed, to say the least. So consequently, there have been other times that there have been things with the neighbor. They've tried to do sewer work, and it does not get done. You know, there was a sinkhole about 12 feet deep. What are they doing waiting for a kid to fall in and break their neck? I don't think that speaks well for the city. And to say that I'm disappointed, I'd be lying to you. And, you know, the school board, when they meet, if they want to build a school building, they have to go to a bond referendum to the voters. And with home rule, and I know you're going to hang your hat on home rule, Terry, uh, the 9 select people up on the city council, they make that decision whether we build the white elephant or not, don't they? And that Coliseum has not made a dime yet. It's cost the city a bundle. But they did not listen then, and they aren't going to listen now. Now, what makes you think it's going to change? Uh, you take the fireworks. I know you said you only spend a small amount on those fireworks. Put that into the roads or something. Pay down the debt. You know, they've got public displays that does not come out of tax money. This does. I think I've made my point, Terry. Why don't you pass this around and you can see what I'm talking about.
Thank you. Next, I'm used to hearing an echo on stations here. We move on to the consent agenda, and on the consent agenda, we are having an item pulled at staff request with no immediate plans for action. That is item H. So item H will be pulled. Are there any other items that members of the council? Yes, Alderman Black.
Thank you. I'd like to pull D and E together, please.
Pull D and E together, Alderman Black. Are there other, Alderman Booth?
Okay.
Item J. Any other items? Okay. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented with the exceptions of item H that was removed at the request of staff, D and E by Alderman Black, and item J by Alderwoman Payne? Is there a motion to approve? Moved by Alderwoman Hammond. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alderwoman Schmidt. And at this point, everyone will vote, and then I'll just announce. You can vote, but we just can't play it all out. Well, no, I guess it's not working. Madam Clerk, would you call the roll?
Alderman Matthews,
Yes.
Alderman Sage,
Yes.
Alderman Lumley,
Yes.
Alderman Painter,
Yes.
Alderman Schmidt,
Yes.
Alderman Black,
Yes.
Alderman Thomas,
Yes.
and Alderman Gray.
Yes.
Motion carries. There are no nays to announce, Madam Clerk. And so now we will go to items D and E that Alderman Black has requested, and then we will move to Alderman Payne.
Thank you. And I have some questions for Kevin. Jim's out of the office. Thank you. So speaking of these two intersections and this road work, how are these prioritized in relation to our other needs and other intersections throughout the community?
Well, it's a very good question. This particular intersection we've been at work on for a number of years. It's been in the budget for several years. It even was delayed a little bit just because we didn't know what was going to happen with the former GE plant. There was some, potential redevelopment pending there. So we hired a consultant years ago to do the intersection design study and then to move on with the traffic signal improvements and intersection geometric changes. So that's why this one is where it's at today, is because we're to the point to get the right-of-way. Other intersections that we've had traffic studies done on, such as, Euclid and Washington, for instance, we're moving forward with an intersection design study there. It's just not as far along in the process yet as this is, where we're to the point where we need to get the right-of-way. And then once we have the right-of-way, we'll actually be able to bid the job and get the work done.
That makes sense. But just some, I guess, some
Mhm.
feedback would be maybe in the future we find new ways to engage our transportation commission with these sorts of questions. Because I know that I got a number of questions over the weekend on
Okay.
this topic, especially in relation to how we're prioritizing our work given our limited resources. So thank you for that information.
Mhm.
And I'll make a motion unless there's somebody else.
Actually, Alderwoman Gray, you can speak after the motion made, but go ahead.
Sure, just thank you very much for the information. I'm very excited to see this come forward. As you mentioned, folks have been very patient and patiently waiting, and thanks to you all for the good work you've done here. I look forward to voting in favor of these two items.
Okay, appreciate it.
Alderwoman, well,
Thank you.
Alderwoman Payne.
And yes, I'm very anxious to see this pass as well. This is my ward, and this has been on the table since before I became an alderman. And I can tell you that about every 6 months, one of those business owners comes to me and says, when are we going to get a light there? This is ruining our business. And they are so excited to know that this is happening. And, you know, I agree that things need to go to the Transportation Commission as well, but if this had just come up, that would be something that should be in play. But this has been in the works since long before the Transportation Commission was ever created. So,
Yes,
and thank you for all your work on this.
appreciate it.
Sure. I will move that we pass this item and move forward.
Okay, moved by Alderwoman Peters, second by Alderman Black. Since we can't vote electronically, Madam Clerk, would you call the roll?
Is that for both items together?
Both items together?
Yes.
In second or okay with that? Thank you.
Alderman Matthews?
Yes.
Alderman Sage?
Yes.
Alderman Lumley?
Yes.
Alderman Peters? Yes. Alderman Smith? Yes. Alderman Black?
Yes.
Alderman Thomas? Yes. Alderman Gray?
Yes.
Now we move to the item J, also to Alderwoman Payne.
Well, I just had one quick question about item J. Why do we have to amend chapter 6 of our city code to do this? Why can't we just grant Greenpop a variance on this matter?
Essentially with a variance is a zoning term, and so there aren't really variances to liquor licenses. So you can define, depending on the type of establishment and establishment and the business model and things like that, you can have a classification that it fits into, or that you kind of make it fit the way you want by putting conditions on the license, but there's not really such a thing as a variance in the liquor context.
Yeah, oh, I'm sorry. So George, you and I talked this afternoon.
Yeah.
We had
Mhm.
a conversation.
Right.
So maybe if we could kind of go over parts of that conversation just briefly for the benefit of folks here in the room. Maybe that's helpful. Because here's some calls that I got, right? The way that it's presented in the agenda, with this idea of, allowing the retail sale of packaged beer and wine for consumption on or off the premises where sold. Now, that seems to be a really broad kind of license. And does it suggest, so let's just do some quick Q&A. So one of the concerns I would have is what does this mean that a gas station that sells packaged liquor could get a license like this, where the purchased liquor could be consumed right there at the gas station? I mean,
Well, first of all, whenever there's an application for a license, we have 24 different classifications of licenses. Everything from, one-day sales for a nonprofit to stadiums. So just because there's a classification doesn't mean that someone's entitled to it, right? They have to fit the qualifications that are either in the definition of the ordinance and of the classification. And you're right, this is pretty broad, right? It's packaged, it's on the premises, things that are sold on the premises can be consumed on the premises. Or there's two ways that those kinds of things can be narrowed. First of all, the pool of applicants has to be judged by the 25 different factual criteria we have outlined in Section 4B of our ordinance, which are among these are whether most of the establishment's anticipated gross revenue is going to come from alcohol or sales of other things, the character and nature of the establishment, the proposed layout and design of the establishment, and then maybe most important to what you're talking about is the location of the proposed establishment and impact of the licensed establishment on the surrounding neighborhood or on the city as a whole. And so there's other ones, but rather than, those are just some of the ones that would be most relevant here. So, for example, we're always talking when we're looking at liquor of four things: control of the product, responsibility for control of the product, a defined premises, and dram shop insurance. So when someone is before the commission, if they're applying for something that would not be where this license should be given, hopefully there will be appropriate inquiry and appropriate findings by first the commission and then the council. There's the advantage to having a broad category is that you can be it can apply to a lot of good things. The problem with too broad of a category is that you often then need to use conditions to shape the license.
And thank you, George, because
I don't.
one of the concerns I have, not just the board and the agenda item, is that packaged liquor could be sold and or consumed either on the premises or off the premises. So when I look at kind of the scope of that or the width of that, this idea that, I think I understand, and Jerry said, right, green top is contained in this floor. I'm assuming they're wanting to do something there within their premises.
Yeah, my understanding was that they were going to have three places. One would be the kitchens, one would be a small kind of deli or food service area, and the third would be a outside patio. I think to some degree, and they were open to this, you'd have to have these defined, especially the outdoor part, And
so, and I understand, and it seems reasonable with on the premises. It seems like we've also put this other piece in the definition as presented in the classification that it could be also consumed off the premises. So
well, yeah,
I have some concerns about that.
Well, we already have off the premises, I mean, so we have, let's see, we have, I'm sorry.
Clarify there. I think the intent of all three liquor commissioners was, since the garlic press model,
Right.
because they do have a version of that where they have cooking classes, and then they can buy the stuff, they can consume it on the premises, and then they can conceivably go outside to one of those little tables.
We have,
And that's the thing that
yeah.
they have, and that, again, that seems reasonable to me. My concern is this addition of off the premises as well.
We have about,
The off the premises was supposed to be,
they're a grocery.
If I'm not
I'm sorry.
mistaken, George, and you can clarify this, you're the attorney, was the equivalent of this little tables right outside of the garlic press, the little tables right outside of, they don't own that. The common area. That's
Right.
Yeah. But.
So can I'm sorry.
I don't know if this would help, something fairly tight and surgical like, except where gasoline is sold.
Right.
Or something like that. I mean, we can deny it now, but maybe then 5 liquor commissioners from now might not deny it. And then so I see where you're coming from. And thank you, because that was kind of a segue into one of the final parts of the conversation I had with George was I guess I would have some concern about some of the unintended consequences of a
rather broad classification like this, understanding that the classification is not the same as the granting of a license, and there are conditions and stipulations and controls that can be put on a license. I'm just a little concerned about, I guess, the generality of classification as a state. That's my discomfort that I have.
Well, yeah, well,
Things I shared with you this afternoon.
there's a couple things just since we talked that I have looked into just to address some of your concerns. One of the things, though, with respect to what off-premises means, and Terry, you said I could correct you, so I'm going to on this one. Off-premises means consumption once you get off the licensed premises, but we already have about 30 places that either have have package sales for off-premises. So it's not really any different than what we have so far as what off-premises means. However, looking at the part about gas, we have 21 licensees that have gas, packaged, and beer sales, and we have an additional 2 that are gas, package, and all kinds of alcohol sales. So that would, if you want to narrow the pool of applicants and feel that that is a legislative decision you could make by saying, this classification will not be available to a gas packaged place. Whether you want to do it tonight or whether you'd want us to go back and research it and, contact some of the folks and see what the different...
I'm not sure that would narrow quite enough. I also know
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
So I'm talking out loud here a little bit. I mean, I'm also interested if besides that, are there any other questions, or maybe this is kind of a moot point, from a council perspective.
No, I was actually concerned about it from some of the, specifically the gas stations with the gambling machines inside of it, right? Where I didn't want people to be able to go to the cooler and grab a six-pack of beer and take it over to the gambling machine. And, that seems kind of, I don't like that scenario. So I don't know if it was ever envisioned as this, but it seemed like it would be an allowed use or have somebody could make a case to switch their license from what they have right now. So something that said, with a restriction of places that are just sell gasoline, would be okay with that kind of restriction.
We had some...
They sell gas and most of the truck stop, they can't have video.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
It would do several things. Again, I was just trying to clarify the thought process of the couple of meetings that we had was we don't have a garlic press kind of license to give to Green Top, and that was the intention. But I can see where you come from.
And thank you, Gene, because I guess I'm always a little worried whenever we have something that's brought before us, and then we start making changes on the fly here in the meeting, right? I mean, my perception is that that's not a real good recipe for success on enacting ordinances and so forth. And so I guess, I'm obviously interested in what everyone have to say, but for me, I'm a little uncomfortable with trying to make some changes and an exception for this and a prohibition of this right now as we move toward adopting the ordinance.
Stop.
Thank you. Thank you, George. I hear your concerns, and I agree with them. I know that Green Top and others have expressed interest in going down this path, and I wonder if we would be able to tighten up the language within a very short time frame so that we can make ourselves feel comfortable, but also not create undue burdens on businesses who want to take advantage of the classification.
I was just wondering, how does this mirror what normal has obligations got into place? Is it verbatim, word for word?
No.
Same as theirs?
This is the same as one that was suggested that Urbana has. They've had no issues with it. The Urbana one is slightly different. Actually, it's broader. It pertains to all spirits on premises and also can be served by package or by the drink.
And normal
You know, that's interesting. I almost always check normals. I couldn't say that this is exactly like normals.
The difficulty with normal is just
And I,
that normal doesn't have taverns, and normal doesn't have a lot of,
they claim all restaurants, but I would say that, I mean, they do have packaged, so
you know.
I could check into the normal and see, you know, what theirs is. Usually we always do that, but
Just to
in this
clarify,
case,
in terms of the broadness of it, again, it could be, could be 500
That's right.
listeners from now, whatever, but ultimately, the council has to approve it. So the council can use those criteria and say, no, we don't want you to, you know, to have, whatever, some place that might say, hey, well, we technically, you know, met this criteria, and we got it through the liquor commission, you know, but, sorry, Alderman Schmidt.
We also have the opportunity for some establishments, retail establishments that tasting, right?
right.
So it's like the next part of that continuum. So a tasting obviously is you're trying a sampling of different varieties of beer or whatever, and this is, I'm trying to understand what the difference is here.
Well, tastings are defined in section 1 of our ordinance, and they're very specific in terms of serving size, in terms of length. So my recollection is, I don't have it in front of me, but I think they're supposed to be at 2 hours, and I think they're also supposed to be limited to serving size depending, you know, on the spirit or the, you know, spirit served. So
So a store like Ivy could have both tasting and this license
yes,
going on.
yeah.
Alderman Gray.
You know, and often, I think often for this license, at least my suggestion would be that you might want to have a defined premises rather than just have it all over the licensed premises. You know, like in the case of Green Top, and also in some of the restaurants, you know, or small ethnic grocery stores that had restaurants that have suggested something like this. You know, they wanted to kind of augment their business model, and so other ones have brought this up to us other than Green Top over the years. It's just some haven't proceeded further with it, or, you know.
It could, well, I'm sorry, Alderman.
So I wanted to explore a little bit some of the discussions about timing. So how does this work in regards to if these restaurant, grocery store type places get this kind of license, if we can tailor it to that kind of usage, do you add into it a time frame that they must close by 11 p.m. or
You could.
they can serve for 6 hours per day, or how does that work, George?
Those could be added as conditions to a specific license, or they could be put in the definition of the classification of the license. You know, so there's really, like, say, 3 ways to control it. You know, one is deciding who gets it, right, by applying the 25 factors I talked about. The other is by defining the classification with some of the conditions you're talking about, limiting the hours, saying gas or no gas, things like that. And the third is to apply it when the license is being created. There's a spot in our ordinance that lets that happen. So then it's specific to the license rather than the category.
Just so you know, that I tend to, with a couple of exceptions, George, weigh in, have tried to pull away from the exceptions of specific licenses because, as the police will tell you, they have no idea, you know, who's supposed to close at this time or that time or whatever. So we did have the old Bonango's. We started that one. They wanted to do it for those two, and I said, well, no. You have to close the whole place down at midnight, you know. And then they extended it an hour or something like that, because after 6 months we had no complaints, we had no issues. And there were no objections in the neighborhood, which is another, you know, variable. So that's just not really relevant to this particular thing, it's just
One other variable,
just for information.
one thing we can also control may be the number of a class of license. So we could say, especially initially if we were just experimenting, no more than 5, no more than 3, something like that. So that's a possibility in terms of putting out a legislative description of what we're willing, you know, to examine.
So would that suggestion that there's no more than 5 added to the city overall, or you're saying no more?
Well, more than 5 of this classification.
Of this classification?
Well, we could do it either way, but we'd probably be better off with the classification.
With respect to, Alderman Sage's point, if, we could do it one of a couple of ways, and that is, the council could say, hey, these are a couple things we'd like the liquor commission to do, let the commission do it, or if it's comparatively tight and surgical, an amendment, for example, whose, an establishment whose primary purpose is to sell food.
Right, I mean, like it is for a restaurant or
That's
or
going to
just...
eliminate
Mhm.
a lot of places, and maybe that should have been included to begin with. I don't recall all of our conversations with some of these several months ago.
You know, one way we, if you decided to do this to get more information, it's too late for the regular liquor commission, and tomorrow. But we could put it on next month, we could take feedback in the meantime, and maybe come back soon after that with a proposal, or, something along those lines, if that's the feeling.
I mean, for me personally, I don't want to, I'm cognizant of all these impacts of delaying things on business operations, I understand that, but I guess I would be a little bit more comfortable if this could be tightened up a little bit more at the staff level, rather than us trying to do it here on the fly, which I'm absolutely discomfortable with. And it gives you, George, some time, I think, to perhaps go back and figure out how to bring some of these council ideas and comments and feedback maybe into an updated report.
Well, I can say for staff's perspective, if we can get ideas, that helps us, because just thinking of it on our own isn't, we're not really cognizant of the concerns in the same way that you guys are, in terms of getting the calls and so on.
Let me ask this, would, if staff were to grab something, and then maybe this doesn't have to go back to the commission, right? And that is, maybe if staff could grab something whose primary purpose is to sell food, maybe even say no gas, I don't know, would primary purpose to sell food?
I like that.
Would that, I mean, because that's going to get rid of some of the worst things that we can think of, at least at this point. So, George, if you would, because I'm here to, is there any distance? No, we don't have to bring it back to the list. I mean, there's no particular reason to do that. If we just had that change and then maybe bring it back in 2 weeks, is that?
That can be done, yeah.
Could I have a motion to postpone this for 2 weeks?
Yeah, I will make that motion, Mayor.
Moved by Alderman.
Yeah, we delay consideration of item 7J until our next regularly scheduled council meeting on April 27th.
27th, thank you for that.
Yeah.
And Alderman Matthew makes the second. What's this further discussion, Madam Clerk? Call the roll.
Alderman Matthews?
Yes.
Alderman Page?
Yes.
Alderman Lumley?
Yes.
Alderman Painter?
Yes.
Alderman Schmidt? Yes. Alderman Black?
Yes.
Alderman Collins? Yes. Alderman Gray?
Yes.
Mayor, I just want to say thanks to George, because we talked this afternoon, and I appreciate the opportunity. You took the time to answer some questions, and we talked through some of this, and so George, appreciate that outreach back, back some of my questions, so thank you.
Thank you, sir. We are going to look at the information out there, I apologize. And at this point, we go to our regular agenda. Yeah. No, H was pulled by that. Okay. Under 8A, this review of the zoning decision to deny variance for, to allow in the required rear yard setback from 303 Mill Road. And I have Mr. Jurgens here, and we have one that was recommended by the zoning board, number 1, under A, and then number 2, an alternative. And we have about a 5-minute presentation and about 5 minutes for council discussion and projection.
Thanks, Mayor and Council, and I'll take even less than that. As you mentioned, this is here on administrative review. The zoning board did vote 4-0 to deny this variance request, which is a 6-foot encroachment into the rear yard setback for construction of a screened porch. Since the denial of the zoning board was less than 5, it can be appealed to you, the council. So this is really for you to consider whether you want to uphold the appeal or uphold the denial, which is the first ordinance, or if you want to reverse the zoning board, which is the second ordinance. The record has been before you. We've sent that out for your review. Staff is here to answer any questions, but you are to consider this based on the record that is in front of you, not to take new evidence, that type of thing. So with that, I would turn it over to you, and I've got Bob Mart here as well if there are questions for staff.
Yeah, just caution that we are limited to the evidence that was collected.
Yeah, would you speak specifically to what the obligation is on us to apply the same set of requirements to this, or do we have the opportunity to be able to take that step back and say, you know, we're more inclined to say it does not have a negative impact on the neighborhood? Kind of talk us through what our role is here.
Sure. So when the zoning board looks at this, they look to the various factors to see if they're eligible for the variance. And they go through the factors, they look at the evidence that's been presented, and then they make a determination based on that evidence that's been presented as to whether or not those factors have been met. You as the reviewing body, you're reviewing that record to see if the zoning board made an accurate call based on the evidence as you see it, but you do have the opportunity to say, no, I don't think the evidence, warranted that, or I do think the evidence was sufficient to claim an undue burden or whatever factor that may be. So there certainly is discretion as the reviewing body to go back and in your judgment, see if the zoning board made the right call or not.
Other questions?
Did you have a question? So I'd actually like to go ahead and make a motion on this. I certainly do appreciate that the zoning board applied all of the recommendation, or all of the structure of the work appropriately. But having looked at the lack of testimony against this in the neighborhood, and I think there was one or two neighbors who spoke in favor of it, I'd like to make a motion that DBA denial be reversed.
Is there a second? Second by Alderwoman Howman. Is further discussion? Alderwoman Howman.
Well, I don't think I can ask the questions I want to ask because
We can't take new evidence.
so, I would just say that, echoing what Alderman Schmidt said, the board of workers spoke in favor of it. They followed the process to notify all the neighbors. Everybody, folks that were notified had an opportunity to fill in or write their comments to go against it. And just looking at the shape of the lot, how it's not straight across, I mean, there's just a number of things that there have been outpouring of no's from the neighbors, I would say. Over from the zoning board, I think they continue. And Mr. Walker's done a lot of work on this home, to make it more neighbor friendly. Seems like it's something, as much as I don't like to go against what the boards and commissions usually recommend,
Any other comment? Madam Clerk, Mr. Alderwoman.
Alderman Massey,
Yes.
Alderman Sage,
Yes.
Alderman Malumwine,
Yes.
Alderman Keister. Yes. Alderman Schmidt.
yes,
Alderman Black.
Yes.
Alderman Collins.
yes.
Alderman Gray. Yes.
Motion carried. There are no names to announce. Madam Clerk, we move right along to item 8B, consideration of resolution designating and authorizing the project to reconfigure and resurface Front Street from Madison to Center as development project. And we have a very brief presentation by staff and Mr. Toby, who is already here, and then a council discussion. Oh.
Hey, look at that. Just in time.
We don't have any sound, but that's okay.
That's okay. At least we have the visual, so thank you, Mayor and Alderman. As many of you know, we had in the plans to do Front Street resurfacing this year, and as part of that work, we also do ADA ramps and upgrades and so forth, and we also try to make sure we get all the underground infrastructure up to snuff as much as we can before we resurface, and that's one of the reasons why we're considering this variation in this project. And in this great picture taken from the Lincoln parking deck looking northwest, you can kind of see barricades of where we did a test demonstration in June. And we ran into the signal at center and front had underground conduits that were galvanized steel that are very old, and we didn't realize how bad they were until we were doing some other work on Center Street at front. And now's the time, if you're going to replace something, you do it before the street's resurfaced. So we knew that the signals probably weren't warranted anymore, so we took a closer look at that and gathered some initial public feedback using the signed message boards in the picture. We solicited comments also on our Facebook page and so forth. And the comments in general were in favor of considering removing the traffic signals at center and front and also at main and front. To give an illustration, there was some concern about pedestrian safety, and so to give an illustration of what that might look like, we set up a demonstration test for 3 days in June, from June 13th to June 15th, and then we had a public open house the following week on June 19th before the Transportation Commission meeting, and all the feedback that we received was generally positive to consider removing the traffic signals at center and front and main and front, and then to put in like an always stop at center and front. The feedback from the Transportation Commission likewise was positive to move forward with this. So staff worked on coming up with some revised medians and bump outs to make it safer for pedestrians. So what you're seeing here is from the block on the west end is Madison, and then you're looking towards center. So center and front would become an all-way stop, a three-way stop, and then the green and red and the different colors there represent new bump outs that we would provide a bigger area for not only the pedestrians but also for some plantings and so forth. And this in essence makes the crosswalk shorter to get across the street for pedestrians, and we all know how heavily trafficked this area is with the Connect Transit bus centers on both sides of the front street through here. And so this is the block that's really the focus of the motion tonight, because this is that area that's part of that downtown TIF district. Moving on down the block to the east, we would continue all the way to East Street. That's our limits of our resurfacing was Madison to East. These are some of the other improvements that we would do as part of the project. Once again, taking out that traffic signal at main and front that really only serves to help people to get across the street, and providing enhanced pedestrian crossing there using rapid rectangular flashing beacons, which is a newer technique used in many cities. So that's kind of a brief overview of the 3 blocks of work there. What we're looking at tonight is that, like I said, that one block that's part of that downtown TIF district. And if you pass this tonight, then in the future we could get reimbursed from the TIF fund for the expenses that the city incurs in the upgrades for the sidewalk, the ramps, the resurfacing, and all this that we're looking at doing. So it's kind of a quick overview of the project. Here's some pictures and a little collage of different shots from those different angles during that test. And you can see we're kind of showing, like in the lower left, how the buses can still navigate even with a center island there on Front Street. Those barricades represent the limits of that center median, and it helps to funnel the pedestrians through the crosswalk, makes the crossings shorter, but it still allows enough space for the Connect Transit buses to navigate. We got positive feedback from Connect Transit on this as well as the downtown stakeholders. So kind of a brief overview, and I'll open it up to any questions you might have.
Curiosity question.
Mm-hmm.
Man, I really like this. Does this have potential in other parts of our downtown?
Oh, it absolutely could. We're focused on this, just because of the fact that we were going to resurface here anyway. Yeah, but it certainly could have application in other areas of downtown, and certainly like Jefferson Street that we're also going to be resurfacing this year. There was a little debate about where to go with that, and it's still kind of. But we are doing some stuff, and one of the items you passed tonight was that Route 66 Experience Hub. So we're enhancing that bump out at the northeast corner, but there's certainly potential other applications for this type of thing downtown. Yes.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate all the effort and creativity that went into this, and like Diana, I'd love to see some more just kind of embracing street teachers that let us do this. I have to say that every time Mr. Karch gets the opportunity, he reminds us of how much money he needs for sidewalks in particular. And so I guess I'm interested in knowing what sort of effect this might have on other things that are on our priority list and how we might address them, because we're doing this based on the idea that we hope to get that money back to the TIF. And I know we all hope we get that money back to the TIF, but right now it's being taken out of other work that we need.
That's correct. So I think all of you are aware that as we resurface streets, we're under ADA requirements to bring our ramps into compliance. So that is obviously our first goal. This type of thing, enhancing the bump outs, actually helps us to meet that goal, because in some cases the grades are a little bit too steep, and by making the bump out bigger, we can actually get more room to make the ramp ADA compliant without having to get really fancy with stuff. So it can help us, but it certainly does take away potentially from other work that we could be doing with our sidewalk money. But as you all know, there's a great need in this community, not only for the resurfacing work, but the sidewalk work as well. And so when we go through neighborhoods, we try to, with the resurfacing project, not only bring the ramps up to snuff, but try to bring as much sidewalk work up to snuff as we can. But certainly this is going to take a large chunk. But we did have money allocated to do some of this work anyway. It's just we're doing a little bit more than we had initially planned.
It's a wonderful place to start this. I also had a question about the existing bike lanes. When you have the schematic, I don't see where the bike lanes are on it anymore.
Yeah.
How's that working?
Um, the,
How does that work?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and let me see if I can back up here. So sorry, I don't have a laser pointer, but try to do it with the mouse here. The bike lanes are share of the road lane, and so the bike lanes are basically right next to the parking lane, and you'll notice that the bump outs they enhance the parking lane, but they don't take away from it. So there's still that provision for the bikes to still go through, because they'll basically share the road with the cars next to the parking lane. So it doesn't take away from the ability of the bikes to navigate through this section.
Okay.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
I guess my question is this particular intersection we're looking at right there has had stoplights there since the 50s, I think it was.
Yes, very long.
And the other intersection, we're going to put stop signs there. Why not stop signs at this intersection? I mean, I'm more concerned about it from, I know we're going to have the flashing crosswalk there, but it seems like just having stop signs would be easier and potentially safer, because that intersection is used just every day of the week. Just an absolute ton of people are crossing the street who are parking in the garage and heading into other parts of downtown, and especially on the weekends where I see a lot of older residents and even people with baby carriages who are crossing the intersection to go into the farmer's market. So I'm wondering why just not leave it as, it was stoplights before, why not leave their stop signs now? So right there, this...
Main in front.
Main in front, right here.
There's
no stop.
Yeah, right
there.
here,
This
right
one
here.
before is the flashing crossing guard.
So Main in front does have signals, and the only purpose of those signals is for pedestrian crossing. You have to press the button, and then eventually the walk signal does come up, The reason it doesn't come up right away is because that signal is coordinated on Front Street so that, the traffic as they get released from east and front carry on through from Main and drive on through. So one of the frustrations that has been expressed to us by pedestrians is, I press the button, but the walk signal doesn't come up. Well, it's because the signals are coordinated. Well, the only reason they're there is for the pedestrians. Vehicles are going east and west on Front and north on Main, so it's not a three-legged intersection like Center because there's no one coming south on Main Street at that point. So to put up stop signs, the only thing the stop signs are for is pedestrians. People tend to ignore, for whatever reason, they tend to ignore stop signs if there's no other cars there. So we came up with this idea to use the rapid rectangular flashing beacons because as soon as you press the button, they start to flash. And you'll see them used in other communities like for instance, Champaign-Urbana uses them around the U of I campus quite extensively. And people have learned there when those flashing lights come on, they yield to the pedestrians in the crosswalk. So we think that that's a better tool to get compliance with, vehicles to yield in the crosswalks and that sort of thing than just putting up stop signs where, there's no reason for the car to stop other than the pedestrian because there's no other vehicles that are in conflict. So that's why we chose to use this strategy here. And of course, with that center median, it makes crossing the street a lot easier because you only have to cross one direction at a time. You can take refuge in that center island and look just one direction at a time as you cross. So we think that this has, much enhanced pedestrian safety.
The west side of the intersection has a crosswalk defined there, but no safety features for that crosswalk at all.
Yes, and that's correct. We want to encourage people to use the east side of the intersection. As you mentioned, that's the exit from the Lincoln deck to people, headed downtown. So we're focused on that crosswalk. The other direction, there are buses and vehicles that turn up Main Street, so we kind of needed that left turn lane to stay just for traffic flow. But it's still a legitimate crosswalk. People could cross there if they choose. They're just crossing more pavement than if they walk a few feet to the east and, can cross with the median. So they have a choice. Yeah.
Other questions? Thank you. Is
Okay.
there a motion? Alderwoman, I saw yours first, so go ahead. Alderwoman Howard, and then I'll turn to Alderwoman Schmidt.
Yes, I move original resolution designing and authorizing project to resurface Front Street.
Moved by Alderwoman Howard, is there a second? Second by Alderwoman Schmidt. Any further discussion? Madam Clerk, would you call the roll?
Alderman Massey,
Yes.
Alderman Sage,
Yes.
Alderman Maloney. Yes. Alderman Painter. Yes. Alderman Schmidt. Yes. Alderman Black.
Yes.
Alderman Holman. Yes. Alderman Gray.
Yes.
Thank you very much. And we'll move now to our city manager's discussion. Mr. Lee.
Thank you, Mayor. As you can see on the video, is the calendar of events. And additionally, I'll share that for the community, and the council is aware of this, but starting on the 27th and for every second council meeting going forward, Finance Director Scott Rathbun will be making a Finance Director's update to the council and the community, high level, unless there's additional questions, obviously. But it's going to show where we are currently projected to budget, and then also where we are revenue and expenses to the prior year. Just a snapshot at the end of every month to show the community and council how we're tracking.
Thank you very much. I don't have anything, so Alderman comments?
I just have one, I'm not sure if it's directed to Public Works or to Parks and Rec or a combination, but the convenience center looks so attractive with the planting and everything.
That's great, yeah.
It's like, wow, it's a pleasure to drive by there, even though we know that behind that fence is all glass.
What are we talking about?
The community convenience center, the dump.
Oh, Used to be the gauntlet.
And so with the signage and then the plantings and everything, it's just,
I just want to hear you say it again.
Solid waste
It
truck.
is the customer convenience.
I'm sorry, customer.
Mr. Karch is always quick.
So, yeah, so anyway, thank you, Mr. Page, for, making me say that again.
All voters.
I actually had a question for Mr. Gleason. We had told, 7H, the fire service memorial. Could you tell us a little bit about what's happening with that?
Yes, that actually was something that staff requested that we pull and just reconsider our approach to that item.
Okay, just, well, we're still going ahead with it. It's just
Yes.
how-
Correct.
Still, Mayor, I'm still on the cultural commission, and I just want to point out to everybody that the new season has been announced for the BCPA, and there's some amazing performances going to be coming to Bloomington. And tickets are on sale now. Buy now.
What he said. Anything else? Thank you all very much. Do I have a motion to motion to adjourn? Moved by Alderwoman Hellman, is there a second? Second. Several seconds. Second by Alderwoman Painter. All in favor, please vote by saying aye. Aye. Show me 54 minutes.
Recently,